The favorite neuro answer? It depends.
Joe just had to get that in as soon as the recording was on, so he was the first one on the recording. He always does that. Joe, this is Francis, Francis Joe, and my over
Hi,
here.
Joe.
Um, Joe's a regular. You'll see him all over the community. He's a stud. He's one
Cool.
of the OGs, as we call him. I was also very much a neuro-informed, and at this point, he's an applied neurology expert for certain.
Awesome.
Yeah, and among many other things, he has a big background of a lot of health-related topics and knowledge. So anyway,
Hmm.
Francis's question for the recording for everybody that's watching this was, how long does it take to integrate? Okay, so you were then kind of talking about, you said the task list. Are you talking about the like the checklist for the default
Yeah,
data? Or are you talking about the challenge that we're doing right now and the
no,
habit tracker? Okay, you're talking about the default data.
the yeah, checklist.
Okay, to integrate all of that, I mean,
Is that an ongoing process or?
certainly, yes. That's the perfect answer. Is it's an ongoing process. So if you're not doing any of those things at this point, then like that's okay. Not a big deal. I would pick one of them and start doing that each day.
Okay.
And we are running a challenge right now for neuro drills specifically. We're just doing neuro drills every day. I think in the checklist I call it neuro hygiene, which I usually call that with my clients. Just like you brush your teeth every day or bathe most days, you should do your neuro hygiene. You should keep your brain and nervous system functioning at top tier. And you do that with intentional input and regulation of the nervous system. So that's where your neuro drills really come into the forefront.
So is my understanding correct that if we fix the neural flow, the rest of the body should kind of change and adjust and go into balance? Is that,
Yeah,
yeah?
yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And the
It's a,
idea, yeah, your nervous system controls all other systems of your body. It's the governing system of everything else. So all change that happens in your body always happens in the nervous system first.
right.
So you are correct. When you start to get that handled, it has a waterfall effect and affects everything else. Your immune system, your musculoskeletal system, your endocrine systems, your hormones, everything. Everything is affected by the nervous system first.
And that's
Um,
new for me, so I'm excited. So think of it this way,
good.
which we never learned, right? Like we never learned this type of stuff as we were growing up, but your entire life you've been doing neuro drills. You've been training your nervous system every day in every single thing you do. And now you're going to intentionally find the areas where you didn't even know you had threat because
Mm,
like I mean, you might be able to connect a story to the way and reason you have threat in a particular area in your body.
right.
But until you do a neuro drill and do an assess and reassess, you would have no idea that you had threat in that area. There would just be no awareness for it. And now you start to find these awareness for areas in your body that you have threat, and you start to train your body to feel safer in those areas. And then you begin expansion. So now you can start to, train your body in an athletic performance way where you're going to be a professional baseball player or something, right? Like you can go from, I need to get away from threat and I need to get to a place of safety to, I can really optimize my performance like there's no tomorrow. And like we're all someplace
Okay.
on that spectrum.
So I think I just saw May put in a comment. Is it all, did you want to read it? I'm not that great at all
Sure.
of this stuff.
Yeah, so
Sh-
she asked, is it mostly body work? The
Yeah.
body work.
Where do
Um,
the emotions fall in?
Good question. Good question. Both good questions. So, neurotraining, the act of neurotraining, as Joe said, you are doing it all the time when you are alive. So, what that means is that everything that is in your environment that has to be processed by your brain through your nervous system is considered input that you then have to interpret, and your brain will give you an output. Okay, so that's like what's always happening. That's why you're always doing neurotraining when you have when you're moving around in the world. What we're trying to do is we're trying to take control of it and intentionally change things by giving the brain and the nervous system new input. The way that we give it new inputs is oftentimes, yes, through the body. Those are where the sensory input systems are mostly in your body, right? Think touch, smell, taste, hearing, seeing, and even balance is another sensory input system. So we work with all of those systems to change the state of the nervous system and to change your brain. But we can also do that with, well, to take that a step further, we also use breathing. We also can affect the state of your nervous system through your lymphatic system. So body work in the traditional sense is um, there's many different ways to do body work, right? There's massage, there's lymphatic, there is structural integration, there is brushing, there is tons of different ways. Um, there is hot and cold therapy, there is a lot of ways, and they affect the nervous system differently. Each one of them do. So yes, a lot of it is work through the body, but we are intentionally targeting the nervous system instead of the lymphatic system, the musculoskeletal system, or those other systems.
And the other seven systems of communication besides the five cranial nerve or the that you mentioned, right? Like we don't think about
Yeah.
other cranial nerves.
So beyond the body work that we're used to talking about, you also have the visual system, the vestibular system, of your inner ear, and then what Joe is talking about, which are the cranial nerves, where your vagus nerve lives in there. But there's 12 other cranial nerves that do very important things. So the vagus nerve is just one small part of the whole. Um, and I asked another question, great follow-up. Is that the same as rewiring the brain, giving new input to the brain? Yes, absolutely. Your brain is always rewiring itself based on the inputs that it's receiving and what it's predicting the future to be. And the more your brain chooses a specific pathway, the stronger that pathway gets. It's
And that's where safety comes into play too, is if you do something at some point in time in your history and you increase threat in one of these areas and systems in our body, then we might start to always seek safety in a certain manner. And we might not even realize we do it anymore. Maybe somebody has a head tilt, for example, and you always see them, or they got one thing on their face is different than the other side of their face. And if something got stuck, and now that pathway is just going to become like a flowing river instead of continuing to branch out and expand the way that it could be rewiring the brain.
right. So in order to rewire the brain and to have the brain feel more comfortable choosing the other path that's not as safe, you have to give it new inputs, and then you have to continue to give it new inputs. You have to, it requires repetition. It requires repetition
Mhm.
and intensity. just like any habit is rewiring your brain, there is a certain period of time where it's challenging because your brain is going to want to choose safety and comfort because it's predictable. It always is going to choose the known over the unknown because it's safe and it costs less energy. Creating a new habit costs more energy, and you have to consciously choose it over and over and over again until you have enough repetition and the wiring is more solidified and solid and actually bigger in your brain. The pathways become bigger as this stuff called myelin is laid down. It's like the protective sheath around the pathway. Every time you choose it, it gets a little stronger. It's like ruts in a road, or if you've ever been sledding, when you go down the hill, the first time it's not super fast and you might go off track, but the more you go down that hill, that pathway gets slicker, faster, and more solid in the snow to where you won't go out of it. You'll stay right on that track and you will go fast. That's what happens in your brain.
Is
So
this
go
in
ahead.
spite of emotions, or does the
No, okay.
habits come via
Thanks
the
for bringing that
emotions?
back up. Okay, so first of all, emotions, we should define emotions. Emotions are really, I always say energy in motion. And really, emotions are feelings that come from your body, okay? And then there's a certain area in our brain where we attach meaning to those feelings. Now, sometimes those emotions trigger one of these well-worn pathways in the brain. And when that happens, we are very likely to choose that same pathway, whether or not it's serving us or not. Okay. So we might choose a habit that's really no longer serving us because the emotion is strong and it triggers us to go on that safety pathway. That said, when we recognize that and we become aware of the emotion, we can take a breath and choose something different. Again, in order to rewire our brain in that way, we have to do that repeatedly over time. The old pathway starts to atrophy and the new one becomes stronger. You're going to still oftentimes feel the emotion. Like probably one of the most important ones is fear. Fear can trigger a specific action depending on the context. Okay. Let's say you have a fear of public speaking. It might trigger you to, run away and go puke in the corner because it's that intense. How do people get over that? Well, they get over that by public speaking, right? They feel the fear and they do it anyway. That's called courage. Courage is a muscle just like any other. It's not that the person that fears public speaking gets over that fear. They don't. They can still feel it. It can have less of an intense effect on them over time as they build up the muscle of courage by choosing to do it over and over again. But if you ask somebody like, like a Tony Robbins, if they still feel fear when they go on stage at those huge events, which he's been doing for 30, 40, 30 years, I think at this point, he would say, yes, of course I do. But now he's also shifted or reframed that emotion into something new that's more helpful. You can still feel the fear, but now it's instead of like leading to anxiety, it's excitement because of the
So
competition. Go ahead.
when we talk about addiction, when
Yeah.
you have your consciousness and your subconscious, it's usually your subconscious wanting to feel
Safe.
safe.
Yeah. A lot of
Is
times,
that
yeah.
it? Or feel fulfilled, safe, same, almost. Maybe. Yeah, it's looking for something to fill
Sure.
it up, right? Because it's not being acknowledged, safe.
Sure.
Um, so when we're doing the neural pathways, then does that dissipate? Like, will we feel, because you guys are practicing it, do you feel like you know what you're going to do that day? Um, feel energized, obviously, but the doubts that come into the consciousness that because that subconscious usually wins,
So
right?
let
An
me
uncontrolled subconscious.
let me share my journey a little bit
Okay.
to help you with this because mine, like I got into the neural mentorship and I'm doing all these cool drills and I'm getting all these cool responses in my body. It's like, oh, my body likes this. Oh, my body likes this. Oh, my body doesn't like a few things. Weird. I was wondering why it doesn't like that thing. But it wasn't really until the end of the mentorship when we started doing certain sets of drills and then stacking them together where all of a sudden I felt this shift that I would watch other people achieve or other people would know I can go from feeling pain to I can do this neuro drill and the pain's gone. I can go from doing trying to do a pull-up to doing a neuro drill to then I can do a whole bunch of pull-ups. But then there was like kept coming back to this emotional piece. So I kept asking questions about the emotional sides of the brain and everything. So for me, when I started being able to apply the neuro drills to like when in my day do I feel that neuro is going to support me, I found it best for me to realize my emotional states and mental states for me to do drills to help me change some of those other things more so than I found when I work out, do this drill because it helps me work out better, or more so do these drills and stay in the state of flow. Yeah, that comes with the emotional side of it, but it was the triggers were me being overthinking things, me being overwhelmed in situations, anxiety in situations where then it's like, okay, how do these different drills now you're like at first I threw my system into whack. Like my startle response was like off the chain. I'm looking at the dog always barks, I know the dog is going to bark, but when the dog barks I jump so hard out of my skin it hurts. I'm like, what is going on with my body right now? Right. So there's all of these nuances and different aspects of it that you just that's where working with a trainer, Kathy said to me right away, like, hey, you should work with somebody one-on-one, Joe. And I thought, well, that's great. I probably should, but I've paid for this program and I need to learn this stuff. And now reflecting back on it, it's like, well, my life could have transformed way quicker if I'd have been working with somebody instead of just trying to like do these drills randomly and figure myself out.
Yes. Yeah, that's why you pay for any service is to do the thing faster. Yeah. But that's a great response. Thanks, Joe. Um, sorry, not I was typing a response to my as we were talking about that too. Um,
Which is a good topic. Talk about that.
okay. Did we put a little bow on Francis's question? Do you have any follow-ups there?
Yeah.
Okay,
No, it's kind of in line with
great.
hers. Like what? Yeah, subconscious are emotions too.
Yeah,
We don't
that's
know why we feel certain things, like Joe was describing about the dog and barking.
certainly. And as you go through the process of awareness, you can start to see patterns, like Joe so clearly saw every time he saw a dog. I mean, that's an easy one when we have, bigger trauma in our past like that. Those are easy to spot. Maybe not quite as easy to resolve sometimes, but definitely easier to spot. So, anyway, my question in the chat was, So we aren't really releasing emotions when we're doing this rewiring and stuff and doing these drills. And I said, actually, yes, we are releasing emotions in the sense that we are moving energy and like directing it elsewhere. So the the process is pretty simple, and it's why somatic modalities are really helpful. Hey, Shelly, good to see you. Um, we can release emotions. If we think about emotions simply as energy and motion, as we were talking about earlier, you get this feeling in your body that is a response to your environment. Okay. So let's talk about Joe's case. He was bitten by a dog when he was young, and it was pretty nasty. Um, so after, yeah, he's showing us his face where he's got scars from it still. So after that happened, that created what's called a neurotag, okay, which is like a fingerprint, a very specific brain activation pattern, like a fingerprint. It's so specific of all these different areas of the brain where he was getting inputs from his environment. So, okay, so the feeling of getting bitten by the dog, that's part of it, right? But even things leading up to that in his environment, like where was he at? Was he inside or outside? Was the sun shining? Was it cloudy? Was it raining? Was it cold outside or was it warm? Right? All of the sensory inputs, what smells were around. You know, he smelled the dog probably at some point in there, that dog breath and maybe the dog's hide. Also, what was going on? Was it Christmas time? Was he smelling gingerbread cookies in the house? You know what I mean? So all of these things get laid down as like this perfect signature or what we call tag, all these different brain areas. Now, as he goes through the world, and it doesn't matter how long this goes because it will take him directly back to that exact situation every time this is triggered. And it can be triggered by any of those things. So let's say, for example, it's Christmas 10 years later, and I'm just making stuff up here. So this it doesn't really matter what the scenario is. But as an example, it's Christmas 10 years later, and he's sitting around and he sees a dog, but it's a very different dog than the one that bit him. Maybe that's not enough to trigger this response. So he doesn't feel the emotion, it doesn't trigger a response, everything's fine. Maybe the next year it's Christmas time again, okay? And he smells gingerbread cookies in the house, and here comes a dog that looks pretty similar. Maybe it was a German Shepherd that bit him, maybe this one's a Husky. Not the same, but similar enough to where his brain goes ding 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 ding. Right, that's enough. And now he feels in his body like this racing heart rate and all those things. And he gets this emotion of fear. Um, he gets this emotion of fear, and that kind of sends him into kind of a little bit of a trauma response. And he then, you know, snaps at his cousin and chooses to eat all of that horrible food that he knows he shouldn't eat because he's in a fear response and his subconscious brain, his survival brain has now taken over. His frontal lobe up here can no longer make good decisions because he's stuck in that loop. Okay.
And there's a lot of unconscious reasons that people go to food and grab sugar for the reason that he just gave that they're completely unaware of.
Yeah, it's a safety thing
And
because
and a
food is a
fuel.
right fuel for the brain and safety because you got to think evolutionarily, we didn't always just have food around all the time. So food was a safety thing. If I'm eating food, then my brain's going to predict that I'm going to survive another day, right? So anyway, any of those things, when they hit a certain threshold, are enough to trigger this fear. And when he's unaware of it, then he's going to choose all those things. This works for any emotion, by the way. It doesn't have to be fear, but it's just the most palatable, or not palatable, but the most intense. And so it's kind of easier to talk about sometimes. Um, Now, yes, this actually works well for my next question, but it's not like the emotion or the energy is released out of us. It's been directed somewhere else, redirected. That's kind of the idea here. So when you feel the fear, right? If you've ever seen a a dog that gets cornered, or um, here's an example. Like New Year's Eve was the other night, and in my area, there's fireworks all over. Our dogs hate fireworks and they get really scared. So when they get like scared and they have that startle response, they get that big fear response. Their sympathetic nervous system goes whoosh through the roof. They have all of this energy now and this emotion that they don't know what to do with. They're ready to fight or flee. So as soon as the threat passes and things kind of calm down, you'll oftentimes see a pet or an animal like that physically shake their body from head to toe. That is me in this releasing that energy, redirecting that energy into body movement. Because if I did not do that, then it would be stuck in my body. And if it's stuck for long enough, that's where we create, they've actually shown that you can get this energy stuck and it's stored in your tissues, specifically in your fascia. So this is where, fascial winding can happen and fascia, um, like stickiness, blockages, right? So, if you don't redirect that energy or offload or release that energy somehow, then it can get stuck and it can cause problems. Um, like another example is if any of you guys have kids, toddlers, they don't have any control, top-down control from their frontal lobe in their brain. They don't have a frontal lobe. It is not developed. So they are pure reactionary emotional creatures. When they feel an emotion, they act it out, right? Terrible twos. That's a perfect example of a human being that is run by their emotions. And you could actually do good to watch them and see what they do and look at yourself and kind of ask yourself, like, okay, where in my life should I actually be emulating this a little bit, maybe in my own controlled way? But in order for me to get the release and the relief that that child feels after they cry it out, smash a wall, you know, beat up a pillow, whatever it is that they need to do to release that emotion. So, all that said, when you discover one of these neurotags, of which our lives are basically built on these neurotags, because they become prediction machines in our brain. Like you get triggered by some kind of thing in the environment that has a memory from your past, and that usually triggers a specific emotion or a specific response that was built up from your past, a pattern, a habit, a behavior, whatever we want to call it. The first step is we become aware of this neurotag and the habit and the behavior that we usually choose. And then we interrupt the loop with our awareness and we choose something different. Now, where this becomes difficult, and this is the biggest thing with applied neurology and mindset training. And when I say mindset training, I'm including all forms of talk therapy
Mm.
and all mindset coaching techniques and everything that has a top-down approach, using the thinking and logical brain to try to affect emotional and bodily processes. Okay. There's a disconnect between all those top-down approaches and the survival mechanisms that are happening in your brain that we have been talking about this whole time. The bridge is applied neurology. The bridge is being able to tell your nervous system, tell that toddler in your brain that it's safe, that these emotions are not you, they are survival mechanisms, and you are in a safe environment. And when we can do that and we can calm down that little toddler in your brain, which is your survival brain back here, then and only then can we actually use those top-down approaches to process the emotions, to reframe the scenarios and the things that happen to us in our lives, and actually do the work from the cognitive, logical, rational brain up here. Because when you're stuck in the emotional state, you don't get to do it. This brain, this toddler, doesn't understand language. It does not speak logically, rationally, doesn't really speak at all. So you got to give it the language that it knows, which is inputs from the body. And that's where a lot of the nervous system regulation stuff that's going on out like in the marketplace, out in the world, is centered on. And that stuff, most of it is pretty good. I think they're hijacking the term nervous system regulation in many ways. And they're only using a very, very small part of what's possible. Usually it's breath work, but it's like not very well directed breath work, and it's vagus nerve. Those are both great tools, but they're only two tools of hundreds. And what they also lack is the ability to assess the state of the nervous system in the moment and how these tools are changing the state of the nervous system.
So I'll jump back to my story, Brandon.
Sure.
I was talking with my father about the threats and different things that we experience. And I just watched a video about the first 7 years of life, of how much safety a child is seeking, that like for having healthy adults like grow into our world, right? And well, dad was like, well, when you hit your head and had to get stitches when you were 2 years old, and both your mom and I, including two other nurses, were holding you down for the doctor to stitch you up, I'm sure that did some damage to you. I kind of chuckled and I was like, probably, that's probably in there someplace. Right. So it's
Yeah.
like, how many things are we completely unaware of in those first 7 years of our life that we may or may not even remember, but left an impression on how our blood flows through our brain? So as I was doing all of these things and our mentor is explaining to me some of the stuff that's going on with my brain, it's like, Joe's done all the breath work. Joe's done all the mindset work. But it wasn't until Joe learned to chill out his reptilian brain that I could start to have these shifts and changes take place in my body and in my nervous system. And I am also somebody who's done and used all the tools because all the technology fascinated me. Well, does this actually work? Well, does this actually work? So I tried all of those things. But now I see how our body and our nervous system has the layers that we're seeking for safety that we can use those tools, or we can use our body and our systems to then train that safety that then changes the mindset, that then changes the physical performance. All this stuff to me is just like super, super cool.
Yeah, the great thing about it is that it's free. All it takes is a body and a brain, which we all have those. So you don't need tools like gadgets and all that stuff. Some of it's helpful, but again, it's all the probably the most powerful thing that you can learn in this community and with applied neurology is the ability to assess the state of your nervous system using the assess and reassess process and getting to know when things change as you get better at using that process is probably the most powerful awareness tool that you can have. So I believe neuroplasticity is the greatest gift we've ever been given, and you can change pretty much anything. Um, I haven't, some things are way out there and haven't been proven. Like I don't know if just doing some neurodrills is gonna, cure anybody of cancer. That's not been proven. But I would say that doing some neurodrills um, to regulate the nervous system and get it to a state where it can then, you know, access states of mind and body like our theta brainwave states, where we actually allow our body to heal itself. I believe that's possible. From there,
Well, the
then the
nervous,
body's own intelligence gets to take over. So would we say that neurodrills cured that person? Probably not. But they are a conduit, they are a way in to help us be more conscious and aware of our body and to just really understand ourselves at a deeper level. I always say it's like your assessment process is you opening up a dialogue with your nervous system and your brain. You can communicate with it on a level where otherwise you can try all the things in the world and some might work, some might not, but there's really no rhyme or reason. You're kind of throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks. But that process is probably the most powerful tool you have.
when you said that about cancer, I mean, cancer is abnormal cell growth, and the nervous system seeking safety is going to be communicating with us on a cellular level. So, at some level, when we find safety in our nervous system, we're reducing cellular danger response, the cell danger response, like when a cell will hit that point when it freaks out. So,
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. Is it going to cure it? No. Is it going to be super helpful?
Yeah, again, it's 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 another tool that will help your body access its own innate intelligence to heal itself. Full stop. So, and that goes with, a lot of other issues that we have. Um, Francis, I know you had talked about like blood pressure in the message that you sent me. Can neurodrills help with blood pressure? Yeah, actually, they can help tremendously, both in the moment and in a long-term fashion to help because blood pressure is controlled by that reptilian brain that that toddler back there, your brain stem. And if you start to train those cranial nerves and work with that brain stem directly, you can see oftentimes functional changes instantaneously to where your blood pressure will actually lower. And then when you continue to do that over time, You kind of reset the dials a little bit. CMI, thanks for being here. And rewire that part of your brain to where you don't need that high blood pressure anymore, in a sense. In a sense, it's kind of a way of your brain seeking safety as well, right? Um, for whatever reason, it needs more pressure there. And that, there's a lot of other elements that come to that, right? I'm not saying it's as cut and dry. It's just, oh yeah, do this drill and your blood pressure will go down. But again, it's another way of letting that area of the brain feel more safety and more predictability. And so it lowers the threat level generally and kind of calms things down. Um, so, oh yeah, we got a few more minutes. What else? Shelly, it's good to see you. Hey, there she is.
Hi, good to see you.
She's got her red lights on. I love it.
Oh yeah. Um, so I have an interesting case on one of my personal training clients that when I dropped in, you were talking about, the somatic release and the neurotag. So she
Yeah.
was struck by lightning.
Okay.
And she's really like hypertonic, like everywhere. And, trying to find the trigger is like it's like her whole body. Um, so where would you even
Yeah.
begin with that release? And
Yeah. Do you know in your work with her, is there anything that you've done where she's like felt a little bit of relief? Like,
yes. So, I've told you a little bit about Bionetics. It's funny how much it dovetails with what you're teaching. But so basically, I look for discrepancies left to right in certain muscle, joint movements. And when one is lagging against the other, then I'll do these isometric holds for 6 sets of 6 seconds, and it'll wake up. It's basically telling the nervous system it's safe to move within that range, and then it just opens up that
yeah,
range. So
beautiful.
yeah, well, she has these hypertonic muscles, so she has severed both of her biceps completely and decided
In that one lightning strike.
no, in training after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
dead.
right.
Once was benching, once was deadlifting. She's a power.
Wow.
So the funny thing is, so she basically doesn't have a bicep attached. She decided not to do surgery. She's still completely lifting. Um, but if I do the activation of the bicep, even without it really being attached, then her whole trap and neck and everything lets go. So it's almost like
Okay.
what do they call that? Phantom limb response kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I can see why you would think that, but the limb is still there, right? The muscle's still there, and there's
Right.
still nerves connected to it.
Hmm.
So, like Joe actually just put in the chat, that's a perfect way to think about it. It's remapping the area of the brain where that muscle and sits.
Yeah.
When it was torn, right, we have the map in our brain of every inch of our body, and it's always being updated. But when that muscle was torn, if it wasn't rehabilitated correctly, which I don't know how it would be, um, yeah, there is now a blurry map there,
Hmm.
and the brain doesn't really know what's going on, and so that creates threat. So then these other muscles are now hypertonic to try to protect.
Yep.
And so by you doing your activation there, what you're really doing is you're giving sensory input
Hmm.
to that muscle and helping remap the brain to make the map more clear, to know, okay, now where does the end of this muscle live? Where is the end of that tendon and connection, and what's
Hmm.
going on in there? And that just lowers threat and
Yep.
just lets
It's
it relax.
it's so cool to watch. Everything just I like her trap will be like a rock, and then I'll just do the 6 sets, and then it's soft and squishy, and it just completely lets go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Joe, perfect answer in the chat too. A lot of sensory work to that area. All the sensory receptors, hot, cold, vibration, which is high frequency and or low frequency vibration. They are separate. You can do sharp and dull discrepancy. Like,
mhm.
can you tell is this sharp versus dull? Um, You can compare both sides when you
Hmm.
do that. Like, how does this one feel compared to this side,
Hmm.
right? You can do light touch on there. I don't know what your activator is, but like electrical stim,
Hmm. So,
helpful. Even red light, like these type of things, all of that is different inputs for the brain to process and create a better, clearer map.
yeah. So, now that she had an actual injury to work with, I know basically how to activate into that once it happens. But my concern is she's hypertonic everywhere after.
Yeah,
So, and that's why she tore her biceps. And
yeah.
it's now I want to get to releasing everything else before she has another injury.
So working on that area, that's just a really good opportunity
Hmm.
for reducing threat everywhere.
Yeah.
Everything affects everything.
Hmm.
So that's just a clear opportunity to make some change. But beyond that, anywhere you can reduce threat is going to be helpful. Um, Hypertonicity, again, that's all coming from the brainstem.
Hmm.
So yeah, cranial nerves can be helpful here. Like you have some vagus nerve tools. I would try those with her. Uh,
Hmm.
I would try, some simple like exhale focused breath work,
Hmm.
like straw breathing, like the diaphragm stretch that you and I have done together, like burst breathing. I mean, or just super long exhales.
Hmm.
You could also try tongue movements. You could try humming and gargling. Um, some vestibular work is going to be helpful because those nerves go straight into the brainstem, like bouncing, shifting back and forth, or head rotations, like VOR. And
Hmm.
then the other thing is just, I'm missing a cranial nerve. Oh, like trigeminal nerve, um, like sensory input to her face,
Okay.
especially if she is like a jaw clencher.
Hmm. It's fascinating. I love working on her. I get lost in it and it's so fascinating to see how quickly things change.
Yeah, that's a high flow client there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thanks for all the ideas. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Okay. It's about 11. I think we should probably wrap this up.
Mm.
Um, thank you guys for being here. This was great. Yeah, thanks Francis for showing up and asking some great questions. It's a great conversation. I always post these recordings in the community. Um, and who's doing their neuro drills, by the way? Attaboy. I only got 3 times yesterday, so I failed already. I did not get a free session from myself. Dang it. But yeah, that's we're on day 2. So good job, guys. Keep it up. I'm gonna be checking in. Thank you, Joe, for also checking in on that in the community. I appreciate that. So we'll get this replay uploaded, and if you guys have any more questions, feel free to put them in the group or send me a message directly. Hope you guys have an awesome day. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you on the flip side. All right. Bye, everybody.